Welcome to the Digible Dudes podcast. I'm David.
I'm Reid.
Reid, we took a week off because I was out lumberjacking in the woods, but now we're back. We're back to it. In today's episode, has been a long time on your list of white label, but what had you had this on the list for so long? Like why did you want to get into white labeling?
Well, some of it was me, and big part of it was also like just questions I field, and sometimes it's even from our own employees, but typically, of course, it's from our clients, and less directed at us. But up front, I think it was a fair and also somewhat common question. As a small agency just trying to make it, it's like, how much of this work are you guys really doing? Because it just seemed unrealistic with as much ground as we were covering and the attention that we were giving clients. Is this really just a 3 or 4 person shop? And the answer was yes, but we did have some help along the way. And then, I think it's fascinating to talk through the economics of it on both sides. As a business owner, trying to, I guess, share a little bit of what that perspective is, where we're coming from, but then also putting yourself in the shoes of the client, saying, is this something I should be paying extra for? Is this normal? Am I being taken advantage of that kind of thing? And then the last, I guess, straw, if you will, or what prompted this was a conversation I had with Melissa Robbins over there at Graystar. She's, savvy marketer and, has a real high curiosity for this kind of stuff. Not white labeling in particular, but she likes to know the full picture. And so we had a good conversation about it, and it made me think it's definitely time, for us to go ahead and knock this one out.
Yeah, well, I think it's a great topic and one that I could see us revisiting from time to time. Because it is, I feel like people have always used the words like outsourced and vendors and everything, like when it comes to business. But for some reason, white labeling, I feel like it's almost gotten a dirty, connotation to it now. And so I like that in this episode, we go into like, what does it mean? Like where, what concerns should you have and what question should you be asking? Because it's not necessarily a bad thing if someone's white labeling something, but it's more about the transparency of that, probably more than anything.
Yeah. It's funny. We came onto this and I never put any trivia question past you, especially when it comes to ad tech. But I don't really even know where the term comes from. I mean, I guess there's a basic, element to it that you understand, but why not black label? Why not red label? Like, where does white label come from?
I'm going to take a stretch here, but we use the analogy in the main recording about green beans and how Green Giant white labels green beans for Whole Foods. But I think it's so that the label is white so that you can paint your own branding on it. So it's your product.
That would be a pretty good guess. Yeah.
We're just going to go with that as the internet fact, We'll
have to verify that. There's some company I think that sent us, remember, they did a really nice job with their marketing. Yep. And wasn't that their name was white label or something? Or did they take a different spin on it?
No, it was something like that. It was like white label or 8% or something, but they did a fantastic job. So funny enough, like they were wanting to white label our digital services, but they sent us a direct mailer. That was, it was like, we should have done like an unboxing video on their mailer. It was like so impressive. And kudos to that. I don't know how I would look them up now if we decided we wanted their services, but it really was impactful at the time.
Yeah, it was one of the best marketing pieces I've ever seen. And we still didn't return the
yeah. I almost wanted to talk to them just to like see what I could learn or whatever at that point, because it's like, you guys have thought this out.
Yeah, I wanted to give them just a shout out. Yeah. Well, anyways, hopefully this one provides some value, and agree with you 100%. There's probably more to come here. It'd be fun to talk, I think, with one of our clients like on the podcast about it.
Well, before we move to the main episode, Reid, I do have one pop quiz for you. But if there was one thing that you could white label, what would it be? Meaning that you would want to buy a white label for.
Pop quiz or survey?
Like, I guess survey. I was just like popping the question on you.
You're making me feel like this is a pass fail. Well, this is tricky, because we don't really white label much, so I don't want to say
Well,
anything.
that's
And
what I'm
then,
saying. Like, I'll give an example, but like invoicing, it's such a pain in the rear, right? When we had so many clients, it's like, do we hire someone to do this, or do we just find like the best in the world to go handle our invoicing? So, is there something that just grates on you that you're like, wish I had a solution for this?
um, not. I know that I'm disappointing you, but not really. I feel like you almost. I mean, you just the collections, which we do have an agreement. We have somebody that supports us on that. I can't imagine us dealing day in and day out with the brunt of that. So, hopefully I didn't expose
No.
too much, but I just, that would have driven us nuts. And so, yeah, we have a partner that supports us on our receivables. The invoicing is just a bear, but that's really backstage already. So I don't think of that, as much in terms of white label, but really, me. I mean, any of the back office stuff, I really can't stand. I mean, I'm I guess, stereotypical, like in that regard, like, just, yeah. As much as I can get away from that, the better.
Well, I've recommended many people over to Axum, who you're referencing, for our receivables. Like they are just, as you say in the episode, an extension of our team, and we couldn't have done it better ourselves. So they're, for me, a partner for life. But yeah, I don't have anything else. I mean, there's annoying stuff that I'd love to outsource, which I guess as we get into in the episode, like I think about all those like Inglewood tax documents or whatever that you're sent. It's like, can someone please handle this besides Reid or me? It's like there's got to be better, someone better for this stuff. So yeah.
I have mixed feelings, and I'll promise to be brief here, but on HR, like that one's tricky. We use JustWorks. They're a PEO, which is a personal employer organization or something. I think I have that right, but they offer a lot of support, like light support on that stuff, but they don't want to take it on, all the way. And for an early stage company, that's always, I feel like, always a pain point. One of the last things you invest in. I'm not sure that it's important whether it's white labeled or not, but that's one of those things that doesn't excite me a ton about like building out or investing in our own HR department, but I know how important it is. We invest a ton of money in development, trying to grow our employees, but there's the X's and O's of HR. And that's where I think, it'd be nice to have a solution there that was still, I guess, experienced as part of Digible, not some, third party on another planet.
We're getting close to talking about like outsourcing, which is another topic. But yeah, I'm with you. Like, at first I almost had as a sticking point that someone's paycheck would say JustWorks versus Digible, right? Because of the way the PEO works. But eventually I got over it because the benefits just outweighed everything. But same thing there as you're saying with HR is like, don't have that in the budget anytime soon, but it'd be nice to have someone that is as integrated as, just as if they were part of the team, just like we do with so many other things. But that's part of our employee experience project, I guess. Yeah.
So. Well, the other one that you could say is part of that is recruitment. Like, do you want a recruiter that, I mean, heck, we there's also the legal, right? There's these, I don't want to say they're things you don't think about. They, if you grow quickly, they come up quickly, but some of those services, like having to use LinkedIn or whatever solutions, I'd love to have somebody full time, but could we spend it probably smarter in some other place? Yes. And then with the recruiter, I think there is a lot of value in them living in your culture, if you will, really knowing who we're about. But if we could strike a good deal and had somebody we really trusted, I'd be okay probably white labeling that solution for a little while.
Totally. All right. Well, if you guys find white labeling interesting, we kind of get into some of the economics of it, as Reid said, and some of the pros and cons and some of the questions you should be asking your vendors. So stay tuned after the break. So Reid, we're today. This has been a topic you've had on the docket for a while, but it's white labeling. So probably the best place to start is for you to explain to people what exactly is white labeling, because many of them may not even know that it exists.
Yeah, sure. Been a hot topic, but then it cools and then it comes back up, at least for me, over the course of the last 15 years. But it's just when you effectively, it's similar to subcontracting, but where you're purchasing services or products, typically services, through one agency, and they're farming out that work to another agency that may have, a little bit higher skill set or bandwidth in order to do the duties. And you never realize it because they keep it under their brand. Sometimes that's platforms too, and openly we don't mind saying it. Our dashboards have Digible on them, but they're powered by a company called NinjaCat. So hopefully that's not some jaw dropping like reveal there.
For
But
reporting,
yeah, for
specifically reporting.
reporting. Yeah. I mean, certainly not to overreact or qualify here, but Digible does do all its own work on all the services we provide. But there's occasion for us more so on the creative, because that's not our sweet spot. That's not something we have, a whole lot of resources dedicated to, that we might farm out to record like a Spotify spot or something like that. But some agencies and companies, I think, are way more intentional about it, really protective, kind of keeping that under the cuff, whereas others, are more comfortable with having a transparent conversation about that.
Yeah, so white labeling is not that different from like I don't even remember the name. Reid, I'm trying to think of the green giant. Green Giant green beans sells green giant green beans under the Whole Foods brand, for example, in the Whole Foods. So you just slap your own thing on
Perfect.
it, but you don't do the
Yeah.
manufacturing. But that happens in digital a lot, and in fact, it happens in agencies a lot. And a lot of, well, I've got my own reasons behind it. I'm sure you have yours, but a lot of times it's just because it's hard to hire a headcount. So back to your Spotify, like we do quite a bit of Spotify ads now, but do we do enough Spotify ads to be a full-time Spotify production shop? No, right? So when does it make sense to hire a full headcount to monitor that? And if you have something that's very transactional, like logo design or copywriting or something, it typically is really challenging to figure out the right amount of like lead generation to customer bookings to fill the hours of that person. And so a lot of times you end up contracting it out or just going to a firm that only white label services to other agencies. And it's just an easier way to get off the ground so somebody can be more of a one-stop shop.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I feel like right now it's kind of the perfect storm um, in digital for white labeling, because you have a lot of the old guard, I'll put it that way, and I'm not going to lump us into that for sure, but that have been around for a little while, and they're trying to stay relevant, have differentiators, and so that puts the burden on them either to build and develop technology, which many of them are not skilled or comfortable doing, or going out and buying it. And when they buy it, they like to look like the heroes, kind of give that idea that it's really their stuff. And that perfectly lines up with this proliferation of startups and tech startups in particular. They don't have the sales force, so they put a lot of their investment up front in building out the technology. But they don't have either the relationships, or they can't afford to develop or build out a sales team. So what do? It's what you just described. Like, they make a living literally off of going door to door with agencies, not direct clients, saying, hey, I can make you guys look really smart. I got this new technology. Why don't you just white label it? And that helps accelerate their growth and, prolongs their life, to the extent that the technology really is valued. So I think that convergence of, still a lot of old school, agencies out there trying to stay relevant, along with the new upcoming techs, perfect storm.
Well, so there's more than two types of white labeling, but let's say there's the services aspect of white labeling, and then you're on the tech side, so we can go tech side first. Tech side makes, I think, a lot of sense to people. Most people, I feel like, have an idea that like, oh, I've seen this platform before, back to NinjaCat or TapClicks or something. Like, I've seen this reporting platform before. Of course, it would be a lot for every agency. Google quoted us 30,000 agencies, right? So 30,000 agencies to make their own reporting dashboard, that doesn't make sense. So of course, something like that exists. It's similar to like online leasing. I don't know of a management company that's made their own online leasing portal. They buy someone else's technology and then they white label it to be their property to look like it's their own property online leasing, right? So I don't see that as a negative. I don't know. I would say like there's different ways that you can apply the technology, right? Like Reid, I feel like you have 100 examples about and analogies for that. But just because someone else ever, because I'll say most of the people in the space that we deal with are using NinjaCat from a provider standpoint as their reporting dashboard, doesn't mean that obviously all the reports are the same. Like it's still how you apply that technology that you're using it. But while we stay on this technology side of things, Reid, do you see negatives with white labeling or things that clients should be aware of regarding technology?
No, not really. I do think technology it's the most rampant, and for obvious reasons. I mean, just the way you describe, like it's ridiculous to think with all the agencies out there that everybody's going to try and do their homegrown thing. In a way, well, not in a way. It's to me very much like CMSs. A lot of publishers like that would be the same as them trying to rip or build their own CMS versus just using the plug and plays that are out there like a WordPress or Squarespace, etc. So I don't have much issue with it. I think the biggest gripe, and this will probably move us over to services, but I'll just say is still the accountability side of things. If things aren't going right, they want to talk to the person that's actually developed the technology. And, again, we'll eventually get into services, but it's doing the work. But I think that's less true with the platforms than it is with services.
I would say my biggest roadblocks would be how depends how deep you want to get. So for example, like if you had a vendor that's like, oh, we have our own call tracking and we call track. It's like, do you really have your own call tracking or are you using something like CallRail to basically as your vendor? And so vendors and white label are basically can be interchanged, right? And so if you're someone that's been super deep in the CallRail and you know the sticking points with call tracking that platform provides, it's good for you to know. So it's like, first of all, you should just be back to vetting your vendor. You should ask your vendor, oh, what tech are you using as your back end for your calls or for your reporting or whatever, so that you can be aware of the holes in whatever platform they're using.
Yep. I think the one other thing, and this is on both sides, but maybe there's just less known or understood about the tech is what does that mean for the markup? It's like, am I paying too much for this? It seems like there's one or two people in between us, and therefore this just doesn't feel good. I must be getting not ripped off, but just am I getting taken advantage of? And that's not something I heard as much even just a few years ago. But I feel like, and this had to be expected, that slowly but surely some more and more people, I guess, would be having this conversation or hearing about it, and so it puts the pressure on. Agencies in particular, just digital service agencies to expose or talk through that. And that's tricky. And I think that, again, is going to get us probably talking here pretty soon about the service side. But, some days I know it really irks you. And it can get to me. It's like, when you go in and buy a t-shirt, you don't like go to the front to the cashier and say, who made this? How much are you guys taking home? That kind of stuff. But yet it's starting to become a pretty common thread in the digital space. And again, I understand, but I also sometimes can be frustrating trying to explain people that
Yeah,
whole
I
game.
think I think a lot of times the market has helped set the price, right? So like I haven't heard of it used to be, for example, Reach Local's rates were like double that of everybody else. And they had a reason for that, and it wasn't exactly a bad reason. Um, but now that most rates are normalized, I mean, certainly there's still like if you're paying for CPM based thing, rates can be different. But I would say use it as an opportunity to ask someone their tech stack and see what's all bundled in. So like if you have a mom and pop shop out of their garage, they may not bundle in like anti-bot technology, right? Or some sort of bid budget management system or something like that. Whereas if you work with a bigger agency, the bigger agency is used to absorbing those costs of like, oh, we're going to use an anti-bot thing so that your Google ads, you're not charged for bot clicks, basically, right? And that's something that maybe the bigger agency is a higher cost, but you're getting more for your dollar, right, than you are with the mom and pop. So I think it is delicate, Reid. You don't want to get super into the weeds of like asks to see someone's entire pro forma like the t-shirt thing, right? But on another hand, there can be a selling point there for like, why is, you know, G5s rate higher than mom and pop, right? It's like, okay, well, there's some reasons. They have some bundling of other tech that they don't even think about because it just seems commonplace to them, but the mom and pop wouldn't have.
Right. Yep. And we made a very deliberate decision. Hopefully most of our decisions are deliberate. But when we had rate increase this year, that was an opportunity, I'll say, for us to and we've been forthcoming. I mean, heck, the Dialogue Tech folks that power our call analytics were at our summit last year. We were really open about that. And we try to absorb as much of those costs as we can if we are using third parties. But that's something that we were very transparent about in our communication out to our clients is just, hey, we have taken on additional costs. We're not trying to white label or mask this. It's just, this is going to drive better performance, better understanding, analysis, et cetera. And, it's really a pass through. We're not trying to make money on this. And I think that's where it gets sticky sometimes is, fortunately we have that trust and I think we've earned it, but other agencies not as much. And it's like, is this really a pass through? Are you marking this up, et cetera? And then that really gets, I guess, blown up or sometimes out of proportion when you start talking about things like SEO and some of the, service side of things.
Well, as we move to services, I guess just to tack on real quick on your point there, if you're buying a new tech, right? So like if you're buying knock, the client goes into it knowing like, well, I could use, Rent Cafe as my system, but it's just not as good as what I'm going to get with knock. I mean, I think about it like back to an analogy. It's like a 1-bedroom apartment. Like there's the luxury and then there's the non-luxury, right? And the luxury is more expensive, and clients are like, of course my 1-bedroom should be $2,000 more because it's got all this other stuff. But when it comes to services, people don't think about it that way. They're like, well, all Google management fee is the same, right? Because it's not value based. So when you sell an apartment that's luxury, you're value based on your pricing. You're not typically, that's not how people, in fact, I haven't met one yet that thinks that way when they come to whoever's running their services. But they do think that a little bit with technology. So I might buy knock even though it's more expensive because it's got these bells and whistles I want. But as you transition to services, our services conversation, people seem to just think it's like a hamburger, and it's like they're going to different McDonald's restaurants, and they're like, well, why is this McDonald's more than that McDonald's? That doesn't make sense. And that's, not all that's true. So I still want to keep this on the white labeling and not the pricing conversation. But why don't you transition over to services white labeling?
Well, yeah, it's hard to, I think, really avoid some of that conversation because that is, well, it's just part of it, like how does white labeling affect pricing, and again, like I just used the example, as much as we can, we just take it as a pass through for things like call analytics or Ninja Cat. But on the service side of things, yeah, I think SEO is a great place, most common place to start. Talent for SEO is not easy to come by even these days, at least in my opinion. And, you're the one that runs the team, but so it's, I feel like the most common service within digital advertising and marketing that does get white labeled. You might have 1 or 2 people on your staff that know enough to be dangerous, but they don't, again, either have the bandwidth or the skill set to go a little deeper with it. And so you line up some contractors, you let that person kind of play front, like meaning with the client, and ultimately, the work's getting done or the bulk of it by somebody else. And I still don't have a huge issue, me personally, but I've been on, this side, if you will, like, usually running the department business, whatever. But I always want to try and be as open and clear as I can. So if the question comes, I never dodge it. It's just, I feel like you end up kind of talking in circles and going down rabbit holes when you try and start there. It's like, just so you know, this is the way that we operate. But the whole buy build, comes into play. And even with people, right? It's like, do I want to build out a staff? And those types of people can make $70,000 to $100,000 a year, even though I know there's high margin there, or do I just want to, work out an arrangement with the shop down the street that I know does quality work and I can kind of hedge my bets and manage like, kind of the financial picture a little bit stricter than, if I do this myself or myself.
I think there's a couple things there, right? So one is like at least as far as the big agencies in the space, they do have SEO teams, but that doesn't even mean that the SEO team does all of the work. So back to like, as you're talking about like white labeling platforms, like a lot of vendors white label ChatMeter, for example. So ChatMeter is actually who we use as our back end, and it helps us complete local listing management, some hyperlocal monitoring and things like that. And G5 uses, you know, ChatMeter as well for their backend. So just because you might have an analyst at G5 that does SEO, but they're still leveraging other platforms, let's say. But sometimes it's beyond platforms, and you're actually leveraging other folks to do it. And to your point, Reid, like a lot of times it's because it's for things of SEO that's kind of hit or miss on are we going to need it? So like copywriting. So like copywriting, in fact, I don't know an agency that has like a someone on staff that does that. Almost everybody just outsources their copywriting when it comes to SEO. It's like, oh, I need an article this month or rewrite, not somewhere else. Our team, we actually, so we don't white label any I guess human capital services when it comes to SEO, but we do white label like ChatMeter with the listings. But if we needed copywriting, our team does some copywriting, but they couldn't, it's not really their specialty to copyright from scratch an entire website. So we would need to go somewhere else for that currently.
Yeah, totally. And some of these things, services where I think it gets tricky is it just isn't the same as a platform where it's like you can just pick up the phone and call the company that has the, let's just say ChatMeter. And I'm not saying that they don't have a sales force so that it can't be done, but it's just, when it comes to services, it's like, well, this is SEO work. Why not just, who are you guys using? Shouldn't I just call them and get a better rate, And that gets, that's complicated between, frankly, the company you're working with and that subcontractor, because they know that that's a possibility. So they try to work out, it's like, well, what do channel sales look like? How do we smooth this out so that there is no incentive for my clients to go direct to you? But I think about that definitely with search too, like, paid search and SEO. I would be asking myself if I discovered that, and it's like, and whether the work was good or bad, it's like, why am I paying an extra? Is it a convenience like surcharge? Like, why do I have to pay an extra 10% to run it through you guys? And sometimes it's more than that. And I think that's where, I would sympathize and just say, maybe you shouldn't be
Well,
working with us on this platform.
it depends what you value, right? So back to like the consolidation, you mentioned subcontracting. So think about like a house. If you're going to get your bathroom renovated, you want to go to one person that's going to like run the project and get the plumber and the lighting guy and the tile guy or whatever, right? And you'd rather pay them one fee versus you trying to juggle everyone's schedule, source the right people, make sure that they did the right quality job, and that there was a chief strategist of it, right? So if your agency is outsourcing, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, and maybe it is worth that 10% from a convenience fee standpoint, but also from the strategy standpoint, because they can have a certain level of quality control to protect you from. Because I think the issue with copywriters is that like it's a lot of like you hire someone hires a copywriter that doesn't specialize in apartments, so they're like, oh, it's an apartment client, and they just write apartments in Rhino, blah blah blah, and it's like great. Well, it sounds like every other apartment in Rhino, right? It's got no real flair to it, and or it's not SEO savvy or whatever. And I feel like this is a slight gripe, which will be another episode. But it's like then you end up just like the agency saying, if you don't like the copy, they're like, well, we did this for SEO. And I feel like just saying we did this copy for SEO is like a blanket lazy statement to say like, oh, we don't have a specialist for copywriting, so we just did it, and because you don't like it, I'm just going to use the excuse that Google likes it better that way, right? Not that it actually is better that way. So SEO is one, but Reid, I think like let's talk about the other reasons why an agency might white label. So pressure release is one, right? Like I got hit up last week by another company that was like, hey, you guys offer paid search and we can be your backfill if you get a large order or whatever. So I feel like a lot of companies, and you tossing it to you for the modeling you did, but in our early days, we had to have that conversation like, do we white label everything or do we go in house? And there's different scales to where each makes sense. And it's definitely more expensive at the beginning to white label things. Well, I think I have that right. I'll just let you talk about like how white labeling scales and how it doesn't scale.
Yeah, well, it was interesting when we did this, or when I did it early on. Yeah, we saw this kind of bell curve, where it made sense up front, but then proportionally, like as we staffed up, it was less favorable. And then if we were to not survive, but just maintain for another like 2 or 3 years, that we would be back in a better position. And it was pretty significant. I mean, I don't have the spreadsheet in front of me, and it's possible that my modeling was a little off, but I think it was pretty hard to argue that it's not constant. Meaning, if you're a business owner in this space, that you're always going to be in a better position white labeling versus not white labeling. So yeah, it's fascinating, tricky, and the clients, I don't want to say caught in between, but they're oblivious to that. But most of them, like if you have an open conversation with them, can appreciate it on some level. And just to quickly double down on your point about, I guess the benefit of, I think you were getting to this, but having all your data with one person, sometimes that still, I mean, it may not literally be like it's all under one roof, but if that agency is quarterbacking it, it is worth the 10%. It's like, at least I'm keeping everything with one agency. So you guys can analyze my data and make recommendations, effectively, versus me having to like kind of stitch this together or have sidebars with, the search people, the SEO people, etc. So I still think it's better, even if it's not all the work's being done by that one company. If you can consolidate your services with digital agencies, you're in a better position to make the most out of your budget.
Yeah, so I would say, as Reed was saying, early on, you can imagine if you just start your own mom and pop shop, and you want to offer 12 services, it's hard to hire 12 specialists, right? You can't afford to. So then you go to some volume fulfillment shop that's going to handle, like if you're specializing in graphic design, you have a volume shop that helps you with paid search or paid social, for example. And that's more affordable for the mom and pop business. And if they're playing quarterback correctly, then maybe that's a good thing. What you have to be careful of when you ask them if they are outsourcing or not is like, well, those people that you're outsourcing to, are they specialists? So is it quality? And if they're a mom and pop shop that's not outsourcing, it's like, well, good on you for trying, but are you the unicorn? Like, I mean, truly a unicorn that can manage every platform on your own? Like, because that just, everybody knows we all have strengths and weaknesses, right? And so you have to think like, are they just using AdWords Express or something to run it? So sometimes you might want your favorite strategist to outsource so that they can still have quality work done, even if, as long as they're paying close attention to it, not just like trusting, you know, it's not Volusion. Vendasta. Vendasta is a big outsource shop, like to do everything.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I was going to come back to that on the press release, but same basic message that you just shared, which was, if we knew we could outsource to another Digible, like, and you do your best. It's its own art, frankly, in managing vendors, and trying to get the most out of them. You and I, not to toot our own horns, I think we do a pretty effective job, and more so because we come at it as part of the same pitch we provide, which is, hey, we need you to be an extension of our team, not just punching in and out and like taking the work. Like, we really need you to be thoughtful and in all areas about the business that we give you. So for us, one of the things that's come up recently is, this is just one alternative, or one solution, I should say, to help the problem, but is if you have some people move on, right? Hasn't happened, thank goodness, for us very much, but if suddenly you find yourself short on like your paid media campaign managers, do you want to like be in a position where you feel kind of rushed and you might end up compromising a little bit on a hire, or would you rather have some white label / contractors lined up that are terrific, like another agency that you could tap into for that pressure release? And if it's not obvious, the answer for us, or what I'd like it to be, is that, yeah, we have 2 or 3 people that do phenomenal work that if we're in a pinch, we can count on. And that buys us the time to hopefully get the next great talent for Digible.
Right. And that would be something that like the agency, you would hope has done its homework ahead of time. Right. So what you don't want is like Digible gets an order for 100 accounts. Digible has no backup plan, and they either get really sloppy internally, or they just find anybody with a shingle to run the campaigns. Instead, we do have some of those backups in case we get too many accounts at a time. We've never pulled the trigger on it, but we have them just in case, and we just have to be like, as you said, like make sure that they can be integrated to the workflow as needed. But I feel like we've luckily done a great job of very linear on the growth side of things, so we've been able to staff appropriately without having to go elsewhere.
Yeah. And that's not even really a consideration for us when it comes to the account management. It's more like just optimizing the campaigns. That's where I think you're more likely to find some good freelancers or even a partner agency if it was needed. But yeah, you're right. We haven't had to go there yet.
Yeah. I mean, we budget, just to be open, like we budget to be able to onboard at least 20 new accounts a month without any problem. And then if it's more than that, then it's like we just need some warning, basically, so we can make sure everything, the throughput is okay and we can meet SLAs. But if we did get 100, then that's when it's like, okay, do we have time, or is this like 100 in a week? Because that's different. If you have a month, we can do 100, right? But if you have a week, 100's tough.
Totally.
So as far as the way that I see this going, when you're talking to your vendors, if it's a very small shop, the small shop is more likely to probably outsource the paid media side of things. Like it tends to be like more, the way I see it is more of like a designer or someone that's good with like marketing, branding overall, and they may say, well, I don't want you to go somewhere else and I want some sort of recurring revenue, so I'll outsource the paid media. But once the shop gets to a medium size, so let's say 15, 20 people or so, then a lot of times they're outsourcing the creative side of things. So it's hard again to like budget your hours if you charge creative by the hour. So they might be outsourcing organic social or logo design, copywriting, like these things that are like kind of like project based versus recurring. So the medium shops tend to start taking on recurring business models where every month I'm going to buy paid search or paid social or whatever. But then that means that they're outsourcing those, the design, creative heavy things to other people. So just one way, it's not necessarily true, but just one way for people to think about it.
Yeah, totally agreed. Yeah, the creative side, I feel like that is constant, it's almost equal to the platform, like we were talking about the technology side. In the middle of that is the services, and that's where it's less common. But just as you said, depending on the size of the company, like what stage they're at and where their core competency is, you'll see more white labeling typically in those early stage companies.
So, Reid, you sort of threw around the placeholder 10% for pricing, but I think it would be good for us to talk through like how white labeling for services is typically priced. And I'd say it's not that dissimilar to what people see in the marketplace. So, for example, like for paid search, there's going to be a management fee. And at least the folks that have approached us when it comes to white labeling that are volume shops, the lowest I've ever seen them go is like 8%. But most of them want to start at like a 12% management fee. So if your small shop is outsourcing paid search, they may be being charged 12% by whoever it is. Then they need to mark it up some to make a profit, but also to cover their overhead of managing the campaign, right? Meaning being strategists like account manager. So then they may be charging you 18, 20% for it. But just know that like half of that or more is going to the paid search company. The ones I saw at 8% Reid were like only once we got to some serious volume. And I would very much question the quality of it at that point, as you and I have discussed many times at length. It's just, you can run a campaign for 5%, but does that mean it's going to be any good?
Right. Yeah. And that account management side of it, you can't understate, I guess, that role in the equation because, and I don't think we're revealing any secrets here. This is just coming from, I guess, direct backgrounds or experience with Booyah, an agency here in Colorado. It's pretty well known. They do both the account management and the campaign management.
The employee, and like the single employee.
Right. Sorry. Thank you. Yeah. For the qualifier. And I very much get that. I mean, as an agency, I don't even want to do the math right now, like how much more profitable you become. I also think legitimate, clearly sacrifices that you make if you take that approach, but it just changes the equation. Like as you think through how you're going to manage or deal with white labeling on the business side, I'm not speaking right now as much from like what the client experiences, but they can think about things a little differently than we can because we also know we have the account management that we have to consider in that equation. And so a lot of times when people think search, it's like, oh, it's, to your point, 8-12%, maybe you subcontract, then you slap another 8% on top. But if you're still paying out an account manager and you're not getting full white labeled services, right, where they're also doing the analysis and talking to the client, you're still not really making any money, if any at all. But then you can't charge 25 or 30%, then you end up outpricing yourself. So it's a real challenge if you aren't, I guess, on top of that staffing and that whole equation. And, I don't feel like we learned hard lessons per se. We did I think, our due diligence up front and figured out pretty quickly how we were going to approach it. But yeah,
Well,
it's just a little different there.
it depends what you value, right? Because on one hand, that we talked to Intuitive, and I'd see it as a selling point, or I might, right, say, okay, one person's going to be my rep plus managing this thing. So I'm talking directly to the one that has their finger on the trigger, right? So that could be a bonus. But if they're still expected to manage 100 accounts, how can you effectively be a great account manager and great at 7 or 8 different paid media platforms at the same time for 100 accounts? I mean, that's just like a losing battle. So I think if you do have someone that does it, it could be great if that's who you would gel with more. But then there's other sacrifices that you're giving up because of that model. It's the same thing with like specialists, right? Like, if Reid goes in for, I don't know, back surgery, you're not going to get your general practitioner to do your back surgery, right? You're going to get a specialist to finally go fix your back. I don't think you actually need surgery. I'm just saying, since you had spasms.
I might. Yeah. I think the other thing that I've come to appreciate quite a bit with the model of having an account manager and a campaign manager, and hopefully people are clear on this, but the campaign manager being the one that's actually, as David said, has their hand on the trigger and is doing the optimizations, is if you're doing all of it and you're talking to the client, inevitably, I don't want to say you're going to get defensive, but it's hard to really play the role of the client, like being that advocate, and while it doesn't happen often, it does happen occasionally. And I actually like it. I love seeing the account managers hold our campaign managers accountable on behalf, of their clients. That's really their job is, let me give you their perspective, and you gotta, find the balance between the two. But if you're doing both of those, then, if you're getting beat up about leads and stuff, I think it's hard not to, again, get defensive, feel like it's a little more personal. Therefore you may not be getting, the same type of service that you would if you have somebody specifically there just on your behalf.
Yeah. So then for other pricing models, like if it's like someone running display or some of these other paid media platforms, it tends to be more on a CPM versus management fee. And then it may be way over the 10% that Reid was mentioning. It may be like, frankly, 100% or 200% markup, right, on someone else flighting it. So I think that we don't have to go through every platform, but my main message here is you should just, when you're vetting your vendor, you should really just talk to them about how they run their business and say, hey, I'm just trying to get to know it so that we all can work better and more honestly together, and you know what you're getting, right? So there may be a reason someone outsources their programmatic display product, but then know that probably a lot of that is getting marked up already. And so then you want to hear like the why behind it. It's not necessarily bad, because back to that subcontractor doing your bathroom remodel.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, in choosing a vendor, and we have had, I think, a couple of podcasts. It's been a while since we got into this, but as it pertains to white label, try and keep this connected here, I think it's a fair question to ask up front. I don't think it's out of bounds at all. And then just have that agency talk you through, why, they should still be the choice, and what kind of value they're going to bring, and how they think about it, how they're going to hold them accountable, your data, et cetera. I mean, there's 4 or 5 things that, should come after that first question. But if they say, yeah, we do some white labeling, then hopefully after hearing this podcast, you'd know some of the follow-ups that you might want to have with them.
Yeah. So Reid, do you, I feel like we've hit on some pros and cons of it, and pricing and some platforms and things to watch out for, but are there any other, I don't know, pro tips that you'd want to make sure people are aware of as they start having conversations with their vendors?
No, I don't think so. I just stress that that shouldn't be the priority, like in choosing a vendor. I think it should be performance and support, and like, is it a good fit? Is the company thinking holistically about strategy, etc. And eventually you get to the white label question. If the rates are kind of feel out of whack, maybe then you might want to hit that sooner and say, hey, is this because but otherwise I just feel like it should be lower in your consideration process or set.
Total, I agree. I think you mostly want to have a handle on like why did they go this way. So like
Mm.
why does this fit into it? And maybe it's like we want best in class X, right? And so we found them to be best in class, and therefore we went that way. But guess what? We're best in class when it comes to apartments, right? So yada yada yada. That's their pitch. But if they're just like, well, it's because we don't do a lot of email or something, then it's like, okay, well, make make me feel confident here about why I should then run email with you. Am I your guinea pig on this platform? Like, are you not really committed? You just have it on the a la carte pricing sheet. And I'd say another example would be photography, videography. I I mean, I know of like one other company, like agency that has their own videographer, photographers that they send around. Most of them just hire from a network of freelancers to go take photos of the property. And so you can just know that, and then it's good to know, but most people do. So
Yeah, yeah, that one's super common. um I think that the accountability, I mentioned that once or twice, is what I'd also say doesn't and is or and is not a big part of this. Meaning, if I'm not talking to the person that is directly doing this, am I going to get the same attention? And the answer should be yes, because the company you're working with should hold them, if not to even higher standard, because often there is volume. You mentioned volume incentives. There's bigger things in play in that partnership. And so in some ways white labeling can be beneficial. There is that the company you're dealing with has leverage, whereas if you were working with them just by yourself, you actually may not get the same attention even though you had a direct relationship.
totally. Yeah. The volume thing is not, I mean, I feel like that's part of Graystar's pitch, right? Like, why should we use you? Well, we get volume discounts with everybody, right? And so there's certain reasons why you might go with certain agencies because of their buying power for certain things. But I think it's just good to just always be in the know. It's kind of like I feel like you went on this rant for a while last year, Reid, about AI and ML, and it's like, well, what are you? Is this your own AI model, or you're just using an off the shelf Google Cloud one? And that's fine, right? But don't pretend like we're an AI company, right? In fact, there's a lot of venture capitalists out there that believe you should not be hiring an AI person because it's like, are you really going to compete with the Googles and Amazons of the world building a better AI model? If not, if it's not crucial to your business, then like focus on the other stuff, spend your money elsewhere. So in a way, it's like I feel like I'd rather hear that someone is using someone else's AI model in many ways. I mean, I guess it depends on the application. I'd rather someone else as opposed to be like, do I really think that this upstart is gonna just cut a better a better model than someone else, with way more uh, resources? Probably not. So
Yeah, totally. I mean, most technology, if you really trace it back, like think ancestry.com, it's not going to be with the company you're working with. It came from somebody else, and everyone's just building on top of each other. And that's fine. That's natural. That happens in all sorts of different industries. So I, again, don't think it should cause any paranoia or concern. The main thing that you should be focused on is performance and service. And after that, if again rates seem funky, then maybe you get into the discussion.
yeah, cool. All right, Reid. Well, I think we handled your white label topic.
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, we'll catch you guys next week.
Later.